La di da di da.
Good evening.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing great. You?
Good.
That color looks good on you, Abby.
Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Trying to make sure I'm in the picture. Thank you. Let's see, what is this? Hello, Kyle.
Good evening, Mayor. How are you?
I'm wonderful. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. Doing good.
Good.
Tell the Brewers happy that the ocean is calm and the sun is shining. So
we got lucky again.
Yeah, it's nice. I was thankful that it didn't get any stronger and it stayed off the shore, which was nice.
Yeah, it was wonderful. Actually worked perfectly.
Yeah.
Now I can't see everyone, so I see we've got. I don't see Lori and I don't see Frank yet.
I would agree.
Okay, you can't either?
No.
Okay, just want to make sure. I can only see 9 thumbnails, and whomever got on first ends up in there.
Yeah, I see a total of 16 participants, and they're all employees and the 3 of us.
Okay, well, exciting times. Well, good evening to the entire staff. Thank you for being with us tonight. Brad?
I'm here.
Okay, would you make sure that Mary Ann is unmuted right from the beginning?
She is. I can only send a request. She has to unmute herself.
Okay,
I'm unmuted.
there she is. Okay, just want to make sure that we didn't have, we lost the clerk a couple of times in the beginning before. We didn't have a clerk. And Lori's here.
Come on.
It is 6 o'clock and I don't see Frank. Does anybody else see him yet?
He just joined.
Okay, good. All right, excellent. Then we will begin. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a Village of DeQuesta Council workshop. It is Monday, August 3rd, 2020, and it is 6 p.m. To help prevent the spread of COVID-19, this workshop is being held remotely using Zoom and YouTube as has been authorized by Governor Ron DeSantis. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Brennan,
Here.
Vice Mayor Stone, Councilmember Brandon,
Here.
Councilmember Diambra,
You're muted.
Here.
Councilmember Prince.
Here.
All right, may I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, for those new to council workshops, no votes are cast on any agenda items. Workshops provide an opportunity for council to speak in a less formal setting, to discuss items in more detail. This evening, we have 6 items on the workshop agenda, which is a little more than we try. But to improve the flow of conversation among council members, we will take public comments after council has first discussed agenda items 1 through 3. Council will then discuss items 4 through 6, and public comments will be taken thereafter on those items. The clerk will read comments made on YouTube, followed by those who wish to speak via Zoom. Not every comment will be read from YouTube. If there are similar comments or questions, just one will be read by the clerk. If you plan on speaking, please state your name and address and note which agenda item you wish to speak to. If you do not plan on speaking, please mute your phones now and please keep them muted. All right, let's get started with item 1. We are going to continue discussion regarding fishing from the DeQuesta Drive Bridge. And Mr. Allen, I believe that's your item.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening. Following the last meeting regarding fishing off the bridge, thought it was a good idea to put the question out to our residents to get some feedback. In your package, you have those comments. We did receive 11 comments that were in favor of the bridge, 7 comments that weren't necessarily against it, but had some concerns on how they were going to be addressed. And of course, 35 comments against allowing fishing off the bridge. So there was some conversation about allowing only on the east or west side, allow water level along the shore, don't pass, and there's even a question about passing with enforcement measures. So I guess with that, I mean, I can answer any questions regarding, the comments or whatnot, but you guys have those and, I guess turn it over for additional conversation about fishing off the bridge. If we decide to move forward, there's a consensus, we can put it on the agenda at the next available council meeting, if that's what the council feels is the right direction.
All right, thank you, Jeremy. I can just start off by saying the comments and feedback I've received, everyone has been against that have contacted me directly. They remember, and I remember, when we built this bridge, we did not build it for fishing purposely. It was built for being able to walk. It was built with the outcroppings there with benches so people could enjoy just sitting there and being a part of it. So we never really designed it for fishing. And many people reminded me of what I had mentioned, but there have been some significant safety issues involved in this. So I'm just going to start that off this time. Who would like to speak next?
I'm going to echo what you said, Mayor. Independent of the responses that we received, Jeremy, all the direct contacts I've had multiple contacts have all also been against it. I had concerns about going this direction, but I said I was maybe willing to compromise and do a trial period. But after the comments and after the people contacted me directly and expressed the concerns that led to the original ordinance to ban fishing from the bridge, I could not support reinstating it at this point in time.
Thank you.
I'll go because I'm the one that kind of brought it up to the council to discuss this. And I guess make sure I go back and explain kind of the reason behind that. I know that this ordinance was passed roughly around 15 years ago. And because the community has changed over that period of time, obviously we have more of a multi-generational community, that a handful of individuals had brought it up to my attention that when they grew up here, they used to be able to fish and they really liked it. They'd like to be able to offer that to their children growing up as well. My issue that I've had is the fact that we've had this ordinance, and at times it is enforced. I will say it's addressed every time that there is a call that comes into our department. But we still see a lot of people fishing from the bridge at times at different hours of the day. And so if I notice that something is continuing to happen, we should probably either readdress it, look at it to see if it still makes sense to have that ordinance. And so that was the reason why I wanted to bring it up to the council so that we could talk about it. Because I do think it's a great idea to since we are a fishing community, to allow individuals access to the water. And the bridge might not be the most ideal spot for a variety of reasons that we've talked about, with the safety concerns, the parking concerns, the smelly fish, the trash. And I would agree that we don't want to sacrifice any of those qualities that we're not willing to sacrifice. But I still think we can continue to have the conversation to come up with an idea that allows residents that don't have the ability to live on the water, access to the water, to do it in a very safe way, in a safe manner. Or if we're not able to do that, then we should definitely enforce our ordinances that we have passed and that we've agreed as a council to have in place for our residents. Just like the same concept of the signage in the right of way. And that's been an ordinance for a long time. But for a period of time, it was ignored. It was not encouraged to enforce. And that's kind of why I brought that up to conversation at a workshop months ago. And so I'm happy that we are enforcing that aspect of our ordinance, that the council agrees there, that right of way is an area that we want to make sure that is protected for all the reasons we talked about a couple months ago. So that's kind of where the reason why I wanted to bring this fishing from the bridge idea, because it is kind of nice to see, a kid on his bike with his fishing pole, and he stops there and fishes at one point or another. But can we allow that and do it in a safe way that doesn't allow non-residents or strangers to come and park their car at the Carriage House or Whitehall, which is not acceptable, or even at the church, where it probably won't be enforced parking. So there's a lot of things to discuss, but that's kind of the history of why we brought it up to the conversation, and thankful that the council has taken it into consideration and gotten a lot of feedback from the residents, which is great to get their involvement, just an opportunity to talk about this. So that's,
Okay.
I still think there's an idea. We need to come up with an idea to get access to the water. And I don't think we own any property other than that one. And maybe like a one-time fishing event during snook season, where we have the police boat in the water, and we can make it to where it is a safe kind of a environment and raise money for a local charity. I don't know, but I would like to see some access to water for those that don't live on the water.
All right, thank you. Lori, do you want to speak?
Yeah, you guys know I all support fishing. So I know last meeting I mentioned I grew up fishing on a bridge. So what I actually did was, after we heard residents talk about our bridge wasn't designed for fishing, I did look at some of the childhood bridges I grew up on, and they were actually designed for fishing. They have little pier ends, they have parking coming off the bridge. There were little pads, I guess you can call them, down almost underneath the bridge, as well as usually most of them have a park attached to the end of it on one side or the other. So I do understand now that I don't think our bridge is fully designed for fishing. I have considered the private residents that live pretty much on the property line of the end of the bridges. I don't, I want to take into consideration of their privacy as well. I would like to see it enforced better if we're going to stick to no fishing. Otherwise, we do get stuck in this, people coming out saying you don't enforce it anyways. My other concern is, I know a lot of people don't want a lot of outsiders coming into the Cuesta. I do agree with that. especially since our bridge is in a residential area essentially. It's not on the east side near an inlet. It's not like the Jupiter bridges. It was publicly announced that our bridge could possibly be open for fishing. As much as I love Mr. Schultz because he supports a lot of the fishing organizations like West Palm Beach Fishing Club, I have, I don't want him promoting that the neighborhood bridge in Tequesta is open and it's probably gonna be the only bridge that you can fish from. That's my concern, is the limit of bridges you can fish from. I also went ahead and looked through most of the communities in the Tequesta area, including the unincorporated pockets we have. About 80%, I would say, have a fishing area that they can access. And for the residents that don't live in a community that have a fishing access, they do have the ability to, like Mr. Stone said, bike with their fishing poles on a bike to those areas. They're all residential areas, so I wouldn't be concerned with traffic or anything like that. So I am going to go ahead and say I'm not going to be in favor of opening the bridge for fishing, because I feel like the cons, the safety, the citizens that live on the property line essentially, and having the public being told that we are basically going to be the only bridge for fishing. Those are all my concerns.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
I'd like to go ahead and say something too. I think that we're a fish-friendly community, and I originally stated that it was kind of brought joy to my heart, go over the bridge and see young kids fishing and stuff, and having that those memories and stuff of going down the bridge and fishing and just hanging out, and and they'll talk about it 10, 20 years from now. Hey, remember that big flounder we caught down there, hooked that big snook down there. But bottom line is that the bridge is not designed for fishing, and there's no areas for them to other people other than the kids. I was more in favor of it because of the kids, not necessarily adults. Most adults know somebody with a boat, or they can go fish behind one of their buddies' houses or what have you if they don't have a boat, in lieu of going down there and fishing over the bridge. But a lot of the kids and stuff is the main reason why I wanted to, or was initially in favor of fishing from the bridge. And I would still be in favor of fishing from the bridge if they could do it in a safe and manageable fashion. And like Kyle said, they're fishing from it now. And so, okay, now that we brought it to the table, do we have to enforce it by the letter of the law? And when we see kids down there, fishing the tide at 11 o'clock at night and stuff, are we going to stop them from fishing down there? So we've got to make a decision as a city, I think, to decide to enforce it or not enforce it, or just turn our heads and stuff, which we have been doing, in my opinion. And honestly, I was okay with that. Is that ethically right for me to say that? Well, maybe not, but it's the way that I feel about it. So I'm going to tell you how I feel about it. And when I see a kid down there 11, 12 years old fishing and stuff, it doesn't bother me a bit. But if they caught somebody's eye with a hook in their nose or something like that passing on the bridge, then that would be a problem and stuff. I've heard, one of my friends here in the neighborhood actually talked about how his wife was hit in the head and stuff with a fishing hook and stuff. But luckily, it didn't do any damage to her. So there's always going to be issues and stuff with anything that you do, whether you allow it or you don't allow it. So I wish there was another venue and stuff that would allow the kids and stuff to go and fish and hang out and create memories of growing up in the village of Tequesta. Like, Kyle said, 15 years ago, I didn't realize it'd been that long ago back when the ordinance was changed and stuff. But I'm sure there's a lot of people in the neighborhood that are still here that remember going down to the bridge and fishing and stuff from it. But, we've got to do what the masses want. And typically when you have something like this that comes up, you hear more from the people that don't really approve of it than the people that do approve of it. And I think that's just kind of normal, statistics and stuff, that you're going to hear from the nayers than you are the wayers and stuff. So anyway, that's my opinion of it. I think I wish that we did have another spot for them in Summary to be able to allow the kids and stuff to go to, other than the other venues, Lori, that you had mentioned. And I've actually gone down and fished in some of them. I go to the neighborhood fishing pier down here, and I hooked a big old snook down there the other day, and I got really excited about that. So anyway, that's where I'm at with it.
All right, thank you. Let's get back to enforcement because as the Vice Mayor pointed out, the sign ordinance was also not being adhered to. And we as a council said, you know what, if we want to do this, we want to do it and we're going to enforce it. And I think we've been doing that now. I think that the enforcement on the bridge is going to have to occur. Because if you have an 11-year-old fishing and that looks nice and quaint, there's going to be the 30-year-old or the 40-year-old or the 50-year-old coming that evening fishing as well if there isn't going to be even-handed enforcement. And I know our police officers don't have to be heavy-handed, nothing like that, but it's time, I think, to do that. I'm afraid that we can't, I don't want to look the other way when we come down to these ordinances. I would like to see that we do enforce it. And there are other areas along that you can go fishing, as you just pointed out. So I think your thought was admirable, Vice Mayor. But I honestly think, and I think at this point, I would like to just say that's it. This is where we're going. We're going to stick with this ordinance, but this time we're going to enforce it. What you're talking about, I thought was interesting. If we have a special event or something once a year, that could be fun. But then it would, like you say, the police boat would be out, it could be done safely. But that would be more like a special event. So that is something I'm sure that we can noodle around with. I'm sure Jeremy or you would be able to come up with something fun to do with that. But
Yes, real quick, I'd like to, I'm just glad that, I noticed that there was a disconnect between our ordinance and actually what's going on. So I thought it's appropriate that we talk about it like we did.
Yeah.
I'm curious, is it possible to create an ordinance that allows only kids? I mean, is that even possible to do? Or is it not? I mean, to me, I don't know. I mean, maybe that's a question to Keith, if that's even possible.
Oh, I'm not muted. Probably not. Not on a public right of way. You're either going to allow it or you're not. So, I mean, if you want me to look into it further, I can, but I don't see that going anywhere legally.
Yeah, no,
Hey,
I trust your professional opinion.
Vice Mayor, I had a feedback because that comment came up with what if we limited to like just children. Some of the parents had asked, what if I grab the rod to help my child? Does that then put me in violation?
right.
And I didn't know, I didn't know how to answer that at the moment, but that I don't know. I don't want to limit it to that. I don't want to get that crazy. But
Yeah.
I wish we did have, a little park or something off one of our bridges. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
But unfortunately we don't.
We don't. We don't have the parking, even for, if you don't live within walking distance, but you're a child in the village and your parent wants to drive you, you still don't have parking. We're not, and the parking that they're using doesn't belong to them or to the public.
Right.
So I just think that there's so many things about it that, we listened and you saw it in the package that I'd like to be able to just say, let's table this and it doesn't go on to the agenda that we have investigated it. And I'd like to say, because I cannot imagine on a public bridge, even though it's in the village of Tequesta, you can say, okay, how old are you? What is your driver's license? You go through all that. Our police don't have time just to be up there on that bridge enforcing that. The bridge is going to be a fishing bridge or it's not. And I think it should be not. I really do. And it would be easier for the police to just be able to enforce a law that's on the books.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree at all. I don't think it's possible that we can do it in a safe way to allow it to happen.
Right.
And it's just not possible. So, I mean, I'd like to continue the conversation, maybe a special event, but obviously we can't do that now in these times, but
Right.
maybe it doesn't, I don't know, but just give people access. Sometimes if it's possible, great. If not, no big deal.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So we are in agreement and consensus. We will not take this further. It won't go on to our agenda.
I agree.
Yes.
Fine. All right. Item 2, discussion on the community center plan design phase. Also, Jeremy.
All right, as we kind of first started, since I've been here with the community center, was always talked about as we go through the stages of the community center, we would always bring it back to council and give citizens an opportunity to know where we are, but really just the transparency part of it. So we're at another stage for this project. REG Consultants is working on our behalf. They're wrapping up the survey, the schematic design, the site plan approval phase. Those will be coming to P&Z and council in August and September. And so we will be moving to the next step. We're going to be authorizing REG to begin the architectural plans and design, development, construction document phase. We will also be putting out an RFQ for construction manager. I gave you guys what that is in your guys' packet. And so more this thing is just kind of an update. I think you have an updated timeline in your packets. It's got the phases that we will be authorizing. The next phases is a $208,000 schematic design and review process. And so you have the timeline, you have the phases that C, D, and E, which we would be authorizing. And then you have the executive summary of what the construction manager is. It'd be very similar to what we did at the water plant. With Mr. Bradford, somebody to oversee that process, paperwork, help minimize costs and overruns, and a very valuable process. Speaking with REG, they come very highly recommended to do that, and it'll save the village some money by having construction manager. So with that, as we go through it, just wanted to let council know where we were, and if you have any concerns or questions, I can answer those. And we will be authorizing. You will see the construction manager RFQ go out. We should see it in the next couple of weeks. It'll be going out in the next couple of days. We also have a borrowing authorization resolution, which will reimburse us for any expenses that come from the community center from this point forward. So any loan proceeds will help refund us for these costs that you will see. That will be coming in August as well. So a lot of moving parts going on with the community center right now. And so just wanted to kind of give an update where we were. And if there's any questions or comments, I can answer those and move to the next step.
Jeremy, you and I had I'm sorry.
I was going to add one more thing. We have already authorized the REG for this. So I don't need a formal action. We've already taken it, but it just wanted to make sure there wasn't any questions or any concerns. So just wanted to add that part. Sorry, Frank.
That's okay. In terms of the construction timeline, you and I talked about the ability to maybe compress a couple of these items in order to maybe get the shovel in the ground in January, so we could get this thing opened if things go well by the fall of 2021. I'm just wondering, for example, the permitting process, construction documents, if there's an opportunity, as we talked about, to compress some of this so that we can get an earlier start than March.
Yeah, so even with the bid documents, talking with Rick Gonzalez, REG, I mean, I think he shows 3 months for those. I mean, he was talking, he would try to cut it down to 2. You look at some of the, the permitting process with us doing it, for ourselves.
Right.
They can submit maybe 60% plans to Jose, and he can kind of, view those through the process. So I think there's some opportunities to cut it down, but, this is the time frame they gave us, and obviously we'll try to beat this time frame as we go.
Okay. All right.
Could you, one thing you might consider doing is maybe going ahead and doing the demolition and getting the site prep work done, so that when everything is getting ready to go, all your demolition is already done. And you should just be able to go through the normal process of getting a demolition permit from the city and moving forward with getting that. And that would save you 3 or 4 weeks, I would think, there.
That's a good suggestion, Bruce. And actually, that's one we have talked about as one means of trying to accelerate the process a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So part of it was the financing piece of it, just the demo and site work. I think, don't quote me on the numbers, $260,000 for the demo and And so, you know, with that resolution that we're going to have that we can reimburse ourselves, we can start through that process and not have to worry about, you know, whether we get paid back or not. So with the moving parts that we got going, borrowing money and also that resolution to reimburse ourselves with the loan proceeds, we can expedite that process now.
Good.
Good. Any other questions on this topic?
No, I'm just happy that we're not doing a lower bid scenario, and construction manager, I think, is the way to go. So.
Agreed.
Yeah, yep. All right, let's move on to item number 3, and that's to review the updates to the proposed fiscal year 2021 budget. Jeremy, take it
I
away.
get to go again? All right.
Yes, you do. Your name's on this a lot.
Yeah, so, you know, just a little bit of a recap. We started back in June. You know, we were $566,000 to work toward to get to a balanced budget. Even at that point in June, or even a little bit before that, as we started the budget process, you know, it was pretty clear that we were not going to raise taxes, and so we needed to find a way to cut that budget. Then we got through June. We were still waiting on some of the state shared revenues, some of the workman's comp, liability insurance. Even in June 15th or June 29th, we were at a minus $175,000. So staff has been working very hard to get us to where we need to be. We have received our state shared revenues and our local discretionary. You know, we're looking at a decrease from fiscal year 20 to 21 of nearly $197,000 decrease. So those are some revenues that we've lost. And so it's been a challenge to get us there, but staff has worked really hard. I know the directors have, you know, made some sacrifices, and we've made some changes in the organization to try to facilitate that and get us where we need to be. In the July meeting, we presented a balanced budget. We were still waiting on some of the state shared revenues. We have received that. The only thing that's missing from this budget is the liability insurance. We have received those, but it was Friday after we've already put together this document. But we do have some savings there. I don't have that number yet, but that's one of the missing pieces. As we were having the discussion on July 20th, there was a couple of comments that came up, and you know, one of the big ones was the non-union increases. As you guys remember, the CPI was 0.33%. I know there was, including myself, you know, what can we do that's better than that for those employees? So we went back kind of the drawing board. I know there was a conversation about, you know, well, how do we offset if we're gonna do that for the non-unions? And so at the time there wasn't a desire to get rid of Tequesta Fest, and it wasn't. I don't think it was necessarily Tequesta Fest, because I think everybody understood the COVID related issues that's probably coming with that event. But it was to try to keep that community feel and try to keep some of the community events. And so as a trade-off, we've you know, I think having conversations with council, I think I've proposed here a budget that does eliminate Tequesta Fest, the $50,000 associated with that. We have left $20,000 in the budget for other events that we can plan, that community-wide events that will bring the community together, hopefully, and you know what Tequesta really is. So we've left $20,000 in there for other events for Greg to plan, and hopefully take the other, the remaining, I think, $30,000 and to help balance the budget. And I have proposed in here a one-time fee of $750 for the non-union employees, plus the 0.33%, plus they still have the merit increase program that they receive on a yearly basis. So there is some incentive or some compensation in this budget, this draft budget that you have here. Just kind of going through, I presented the expenditures for each fund, also the revenues. I did include the changes we made since the July 20th workshop, and also just to talk a little bit about the changes in personnel that we have in this budget plan for this year. And so if you remember a little bit, I'm going to summarize the last chart that I put in the staff packet, which was the employees. If you remember what we decided, we were going to change the way that we were putting the employees in. So instead of putting them into a percentage of water, like the finance director, instead of a percentage of their salary going into water, we put all the employees where they need to be. And then we just increase the admin fee or from the water fund to compensate. So with all this going on, I just wanted to point out that you'll see a 4.5. Really, we have 4 dispatchers. As you guys remember, we went to Northcom. 2 public works employees are currently, we have not eliminated the positions, but currently they're not funded. We will see how the resources work out, and if there's some additional resources, or if we need the services, we can always look at that again in the future. Also, the water admin position, we have not eliminated, but we have not rehired and not budgeted for that position. We have looked at moving one of our employees to go half and half in the general fund and half in the water admin to help with some of those responsibilities. So really that's what you have: 2 public works, a water admin, the 4 dispatchers, and then you have one employee going to a 50-50 position with water and general fund. With that, I can entertain any questions. Maybe questions will help clear up anything if I wasn't clear on it already.
Jeremy, on page 15 and 55, it says employees by department in 2021, then it says fiscal year 2020, and then you show the fiscal year 2021 change. Do you have those, are those columns reversed?
Yeah, I don't know about the first 21. I'm not sure of the formatting of that. So if you just move those columns over, so it should start in FY 2020 and then FY 2021 and then go to the change. So just slide all those columns over a little bit to the right. So there's a little bit of a formatting issue.
Okay.
Just regard that first 2021, but the rest of it should line up.
Okay. A question for you. We had a surplus in the building department, and I realized that you made the change last year where the fees that were being generated by building were going to be split between community development and building. But we had a surplus, and then the statute, as I recall, and Keith can correct me if I'm wrong, is if we have too much money in that fund and it doesn't get utilized, then we have to find a way to refund some of that back to the developers. We haven't had an update on this, and I am concerned about how we're going to handle this situation, because I certainly don't believe our fees are out of line, and I certainly don't want to be in a situation where we're trying to go through a complex process of trying to refund monies back. I would hope that we would find a way to properly utilize these funds to the benefit of the village. So we haven't had any conversation on this lately, but it's something I want to make sure that we address. The other question I had for you, maybe we can start with this one. It's a little easier. It says under expenditures, it says retirement payout adjustment. And I was just wondering what that particular item was.
Okay, I can answer both those. If you don't mind, I'll start with your first one. It's a great question. So we really took a look at the building fund. I know that Jose does have to report that to the state at the end of the year. So he sat down with Hugh and we really looked at that. One of the first things that we're going to do is we're going to move that whole fund and create its own separate fund. That's coming in August. That's an authorization that we're going to do. So the building fund is a standalone fund. Right now, when we run a report and we run a general fund report, the building funds are all tied in there. So then we have to go through and subtract them out and move them over because it's a standalone fund. So in August, talking with Hugh, his comfort level, there's nothing illegal or improper about the way that's done. It's just a different way of doing it. It's an accounting issue. To make it easier for everybody with our system, it's going to be easier to separate that fund. The other part of the building fund that before, let me get my years right, before 1819, we never charged the general fund an admin fee. And so looking at it, talking with our auditors, we can charge ourselves the admin fee. So with that authorization, when we move those funds to its own separate building fund, we are going to authorize those 3 previous years. And so there'll be some money that gets allocated to the general fund from the building fund. So that will, I guess, ease some of your concern about giving, quite a bit of that money back to the developers. We should have been charging ourselves that admin fee prior, and we weren't. So we are correcting that. We have worked with our auditors in the last few weeks, and they are in agreement that we should have been charging an admin fee for that as well. So
Well, let me ask you a question about that, though. The admin fee concept is simply changed in the way we account for or charge for the services that come from, I'll call it the central areas like finance, IT, et cetera. Were not those costs, just like they were with the other departments, were not those costs already embedded in those budgets?
Not out of the building fund. We never charge ourselves an admin fee before 1819, to my understanding. And so for the building fund, they were not. We were doing it in the water fund, as you know, like salaries for the manager and finance director, they were embedded into salaries, like half salary for the IT director was part in water. We weren't doing that with building, so we were not charging ourselves an admin fee.
So we never had, so none of those costs, because I want to make sure, you said you've talked to the auditors about this. I just want to get clarification here. So none of those costs that were embedded in the other departments, none of those costs were ever embedded in code compliance and building.
Well, code compliance general fund, so that's different. So we won't separate that. But the building fund, they were not. We did not embed any of those fees. We did not charge the general fund for those admin fees, HR, finance, those general services that the building fund does utilize. So the 3 years prior to that, so 17, 18, 16, 17, and 15, 16, we did not charge the building fund an admin fee.
Okay, I guess where I'm trying to make sure I understand this is that the building fund is a result of the fees that are generated, by the building department through and code. So it's that staff. And I thought that the services that were being provided, just like they were to every other department, for that group of folks, was still embedded in the costs that they were incurring on a year-to-year basis. So you're saying that's not true?
That's not.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure that that's the case, because otherwise I could see us getting into an issue here about whether we're doing this correctly or not.
Right.
Frank, if you recall, one of the things that we were doing or was being done was that the building fund revenue was being counted and not being segregated. It was always part of how we were presented the budget.
Right.
It was part of it, which it shouldn't have been. It should have been segregated.
Right.
And so in doing it that way, there was no reason to charge the building fund anything because it wasn't being segregated. It would have been in one door and out the other. And now I think what's going to happen, which makes all the sense in the world, it's going to just be like the capital fund. It'll have its own income and expense.
And I completely agree with the segmentation, and I agree with the philosophy of the approach we're going to take. I just want to make sure that as we go forward with this, and Jeremy, you said that you've looked at this, that again, there were none of these shared costs embedded in the building department's budget already, so that in essence, we're going back and charging a duplicate fee. I just want to make sure of that, because obviously that would raise commissions.
Right, and we don't want that either. We wanted to make sure, when it first came up, when you and Jose first had that meeting and I got the call, it was as long as we can do it and it's legal. And so the direct costs were associated from the building fund, but the indirect costs, like what we do with water and stormwater, they were not embedded in there in the 1819 The state statute,
Okay,
I'm getting a text from Hugh, the state statute provides for both direct and indirect costs to be charged, and we were not charging for the indirect cost, similar to what we do with water. And so
Right.
there'll be some documentation that we provide in August, and you'll be able to take a look at that, and if there's additional questions, we can answer those at that time.
All right,
Okay.
sounds good.
And your second question is the retirement benefit. So it's a little bit of a philosophy, and so we obviously didn't have the drop in Texas, but you have this drop program, and when somebody declares to be in this drop program, they have, and I'm just ballparking, they have 1,000 hours of sick time, and they have a certain number of vacation times that once they enter the drop, they can sell back. They don't, with the sick time, at least in the FRS, they don't have to sell it back immediately. They can sell back, they can do our buyback program, whatever. But what we did is when we budgeted for those, we budgeted for 100% of all those costs. And so there was an impact of like $50,000, $60,000 in the budget. Well, in a particular employee's situation, if they don't give us a date, we could be holding that money hostage, so to speak, until that employee declares, which could be 5 years down the road. And so what we've decided to do is, just like if any other employees decide to leave, got another job or retired, at that point, we would allocate the funds either through a budget adjustment, or we would, eat the money in the budget and try to, compensate for that loss that, in the budget, current budget. So what we've done is we put that money, any of the employees that can, are entering the drop, the two of them, we've compensated for all the money that they're eligible to buy back through our policies or what they've asked for, declared. Any of the other money that we budget for, we decided to release, put that back into the general fund. So if that employee says, all right, in June of next year, I went ahead and decided, at that point, we'll make that adjustment. Now, if we knew that employee if they gave us a date of June 1st now, we would go ahead and make that compensation, but it could be 3 years from now before that employee decides to retire. So we're not going to hold that money hostage in the budget. We are going to release that, and then we'll come back later with either a budget adjustment or try to absorb that cost in the current budget, depending on our vacancies and whatnot.
Just one thought on that, because I understand, the logic behind this. Would it make sense, particularly when we look at some of the senior people we have in police and fire that may be approaching retirement ages and may opt for drops? Would it make sense to basically create an averaging mechanism for that, so that you're recapturing some, but you understand you have that liability and you're going to basically account for it, over the 5-year period, so that it isn't a shock at the time it comes.
Right.
I
I think that's an interesting concept. We can look at that. I think, we were brainstorming, but we can also go back to drawing board and see if that's something I can speak with you about.
Okay.
Jeremy, can I add to that real quick?
Sure.
Whether the employee enters the drop or they decide to retire, we're still going to be responsible for those payouts for sick time.
Yep.
And so, and do we have a cap on sick time or sick leave as a policy?
So, and don't quote me on the exact policy without pulling it up, but if they've been there so many years, they can cash out 50%. If they've been, so it's based on a number of years, so they can cash out a percentage of their sick time. So if they have 1,000 hours, depending on the number of years of service, they get 50% of that. And so if they have 2,000 hours, they get 50% of that. And so I think that's going to be your situation with most of them. They get 50% of the sick time that they have accumulated.
But there's no cap on the amount they can accumulate.
I thought there was a cap in there
I think there
somewhere.
is. Well,
cap.
Merlene's on this meeting. I don't know if she can.
Marlene can, if
jump in
Marlene
on
wants
this.
to answer that, Brad, if you can unmute Marlene. I don't know if there's a cap, or if there is, it may not have been put in place before.
He's unmuted.
Merlene?
Hello?
Hi.
Hey, yes, there's a cap. It's 1,000. It's a little bit over 1,000. I'm just checking quickly.
Yeah, there is a cap.
Oh, definitely.
With a 50% payout for 500 hours?
It depends on how many years of service you
Service.
have.
Obviously, there's a encouragement to utilize that. That's sick time. What about vacation?
Okay, I'm looking at the sick right now. If you are, hang on. It depends on which group you're in, but let's just take the non-unionized. It's 1,120, and that's the same for the PBA and the CWA. The IAFF is 1,600. That's the cap. And it depends on years of service. 1 to 4 years, you get 25%. 5 to 9 years, 33%, 10 to 19, 40%, and 20 years or more, 50%.
What about vacation?
Well, vacation is always payable regardless. There's no tier there.
So they constantly.
The max is 320 hours.
Right.
There's also a cap on that.
That's it,
Yeah,
320.
the 320, the 8 weeks, basically.
Right. Right.
Question, this might be, and since we got you, Marlene, you can help me understand this. I understand that if for some reason one of our public safety workers happens to come across someone that has been exposed to COVID, that they stay home, and do they have to use sick time for that? How does that work?
Can you repeat that? And yeah, because there's a lot of scenarios here, and Jeremy will be well versed on this one. But repeat this one so I can understand which situation we're talking. You're
So public safety, let's say a paramedic at home was exposed to someone that potentially has symptoms of being sick. Let's say it's a child. And obviously, if we waiting while those test results are coming back from that employee being tested, and it might be 48 hours before they get those test results back, what is that? Does that employee, obviously, I don't think we want them to come to work at that time. We want them to stay at home while we wait those test results. During that scenario, is that employee, is he have to use sick time for that or what?
Okay, okay, let's take a scenario where you're exposed to the virus off the job. You are required to either remain quarantined for 14 days, and you may use your own leave. It doesn't have to be sick to remain in a paid status. I'm reading from a document that was put out late March. So it all depends. If you are, we also have the Families First Act going for the persons who are non-emergency employees, and you're entitled to up to 2 weeks for yourself at full pay, or 2/3 if you have to, if someone else is exposed. And was it last week, Jeremy, we decided that is being extended as well to the emergency workers.
That's right. So let me see if I can summarize your answer for you, Kyle. So, our policies, if you're exposed on the job, and we're talking about exposure positive tests, if you're on the job, or if you get a positive test outside the job, we are going to pay for you, or the village will take on those costs if you're positive one way or another, basically on the job or not. If you have been exposed on the job, we are going to pay for you to be off. If you are exposed outside of the village, we will not pay for you. You can use your own time during that period. And if you are waiting to get tested, you're using your own time. And then if you come back and you are positive, you do get a positive test while you're waiting, we will reimburse your time for that time being out. But there is a responsibility of the employees to make sure they're doing everything they can off the job to not get COVID as well. And so that's why we have that policy. If you are basically exposed off the job, you will have to take that cost on yourself. You will have to use your own bank for that off the job.
And in excess of the 2 weeks that persons have right now, if you have to take care of a family member, it still falls under the FMLA, where you have 12 weeks of family time to use.
Right.
But that's your time.
That's
That's your
you
bad.
pay for- Yes.
I guess the only concern I might have, I don't necessarily disagree too much with it. The only concern I might have is that maybe an employee decides not to necessarily be fully honest that they've been exposed at home because they need to come and work and not use some of that sick time that they might have or might not have. So that would be a concern that I just hopefully our guys have enough sick time built up that they're not necessarily exposing another employee of some sort.
Well, I mean, the first thing is I hope we have employees here that are trying to do the right thing, and they're obviously trying to protect their coworkers. The other part of it, I guess the enforcement part of it. I mean, if we find out that they were, exposed and they still came to work, I mean, there could be some disciplinary actions, and obviously we don't want to go there. And we've had several scenarios that we've worked through since March, and I think our employees have always came and used good judgment and, really upfront with their supervisor. So we have not came across any issues, and I don't expect to. I think our employees, have used good judgment and will continue to.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely a balancing act, and every situation is very different. So,
Yeah.
no, it's not easy going through this whole process.
Right.
Back to the budget. I guess one of the things that I want to throw out there to the council, the council gets paid a certain amount of compensation for the work that we do here. And I know that annually we get an increase. I would recommend that as a council, we don't get an increase greater than that cost of living that the CWA is getting as well. And I would encourage that we maybe look to act on that. And I'll add a little bit here. But I don't think we should be getting an increase in greater than the cost of living.
Let's remind everyone what the council receives. And I think at this point with those 2% increases, which is what I believe that we do, Frank, you would remember that for sure.
Yep, that's correct.
I think, what are we getting now? 615, 620 a month? 620? All right,
649.
thank you. Okay, a month, and for years didn't get anything. So I hear what you're saying, but I also recognize, and I've had this conversation with other counselors around different cities who are basically pretty shocked at what we earn, which we are fine with. Nobody has taken these jobs for the salary. I think that's safe to say. There's no question about it. But there is, I think, when it comes to this, there is a worth that we have that needs to be compensated. So I'm not sure I want to go back. And by the way, I was getting to this ultimately about what I think we should be doing with staff and, or non-union staff. I honestly believe that, let's do that. I would love to see us get back to matching what the CWA receives. Now, next time we have a conversation with them for the new contract, that needs to be addressed. I mean, that's where we realize we've got to take care of this. But I'm concerned that for the longest time, this was just basically what they received. And I would like to see us be able to get back there. We have an extraordinary staff. We have a staff that wears multiple hats every single day. And I would like to reward them responsibly. And I am concerned, as I had said before, and I hear what Jeremy's talking about now, and that makes some sense. But I would want to be able to compensate them at least to match what the CWA is getting. I would like to go there. I know we can't do it this year. We probably can't do it next year. But I don't believe the CPI index is fair if we have the ability to match CWA. I really would like to see the staff taken care of better than that.
Yeah, I think from a go ahead, Kyle, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm going to just go back to the council specifically, and then we can talk employees, but from the council, if none of us took this job for pay, which I would agree, and we're doing it more on a voluntary basis, then I think we should lead by example with regards to that annual increase. And if it is, which I think is good for everybody, that an annual increase be based on the local economy and the cost of living. And to me, that makes reasonable sense that employees are paid a good wage, which I believe our employees are. They have a merit way of getting a bonus, which our employees do. Then an annual increase for a cost of living makes total sense. And I just think that we should lead by example with regards to that annual increase be based on cost of living with what I think the rest of our employees should get.
Let me add one thing, so don't convolute anything. I've been told that the council did get their increases already this year, and it was in April.
Kyle, a couple of things on this. The council, if we go back when we changed the compensation level, it was at $250 a month for like 20 years. And obviously the purchasing power of that $250 had eroded dramatically. Even when we raised it to the 600, we didn't fully offset the decline in purchasing power. And we set the increase at 2% because we didn't want to have a situation where each year the council was debating, changes in the pay rate. The 2% was set at a fairly low level. And the fact is probably over a 10 or 15 year period, whatever purchasing power that money provides is going to continue to erode. And the council at some point in time in the future might choose to address that. So I don't think the 2% is out of line. It was set there for a specific reason. It was set low for a specific reason, but it was really meant to just try and keep some sort of pace with the change of inflation. The second thing I would say is, the employees have an opportunity for a merit bonus, but it's very limited. Depending, and it's based on seniority. So we're doing a one-time pop this year to try and offset the fact that we're providing a minimal increase. But I agree with the mayor that we need to look at our compensation strategy going forward. And cost of living is not necessarily going to be sufficient. I think there's other factors that come into play here. Because again, as people work with us over the years, they gain value, they gain experience, they increase their value to us. We want to be able to move them up within their pay ranges, and cost of living adjustments don't really do that. The third thing I would say is if you look at the cost of living adjustment this year, it's minimal. Now, if you look at the increase in health insurance, there are a number of people, particularly those who have family coverage, not those who have employee only, who are going to come out with either a very little change in their take-home income, or actually will turn out to be in the red. So that's another factor, because the cost of living, if in theory was meant to offset the costs that you incur as an individual, well, if it's getting all eaten up by your health insurance, you really don't have any more money to take home to your family. So this is a fairly complex topic, and we're not going to solve this tonight, but I do think it's worthy of some very thoughtful conversation going forward as to how we want to address it. I agree with the mayor. It's something we need to take a serious look at going forward. But I think for this budget year, we're kind of hemmed in by circumstances, and I think we're trying to do the best we can under those circumstances.
And let me have one more question. The pay range that the employees have, does the manager have the ability to increase that employee's pay within that range?
I think the manager,
through the budget cycle, I would typically do it through the budget cycle. I do have that authority as long as it's within the range and I can budget for it.
And just to be clear, are you allowed to make changes to that range?
I'm not exactly sure how the policy is here. I don't think that we do. I would not do it without council's approval, just based on my previous experience that it doesn't go well when that happens. So in this year's budget, you will see the pay ranges for all non-union employees. We have, I know Merlene and the team before have worked really hard about setting those ranges for CWA. We have the ranges for PBA and fire already. Now CWA has those ranges, and so we are going to include the pay ranges for non-union as well. So council will have the pay ranges for all 4 units. And so you will have that. And so once we set them with budget, I would not change it without council's approval.
Yeah, I was going to say, in the past, Merlene has brought that information to the council through the manager and given us an opportunity, obviously, to weigh in it in the fashion that Jeremy's describing.
Yeah, so just to be clear, that an employee that shows that they're doing a great job and they're in the lower level of the pay range during the budget cycle, that manager has the ability to increase their pay.
Correct.
In addition to the budget, I know that we've talked about removing Tequesta Fest. I'm an optimistic person, and I don't necessarily support that at all. I'd like us to see us continue to leave Tequesta Fest in the budget, and if for some reason we don't, or for whatever medical reasons we're not going to do it, then obviously I'll support that. Then I would say maybe that additional money can go towards that unfunded, our fund balance. And then with that being said, I think the council should reduce getting paid. We should be volunteer 100%. So that would be my solution to finding that funding for that, is that we volunteer our pay this year so that we can at least make sure that Tequesta Fest we're able to do it if health conditions change, and we're able to get together as a community. I'm not in favor of removing that at all.
Kyle,
Jeremy,
Okay.
real quick, Jeremy, when does the rides or any of the vendors have to be booked for Tequesta Fest? Isn't it months in advance?
So yes, and right now, currently, the state won't allow our vendor to do Tequesta Fest. And I know talking with Greg, he does not feel like that the state is going to let our vendor provide that by November. So there is some logistics that the state has to allow as well.
Yeah, Kyle, I think Jeremy and I spoke about this, and I would too wanted to retain Tequesta Fest, and I think for future years we will. But he had asked me the question: was I willing to compromise and allow some diversion of funding in order to underwrite the costs of these merit bonuses? And I said yes. In talking with Greg, the other thing he said is there's an issue with a number of these providers of these kinds of services as to whether they're even going to survive this pandemic. So based on his concerns about whether, one, the state would even approve it, and two, whether we'll even actually have an entity to go to that we've worked with in the past that we have confidence in. I think Greg's feeling was it's highly unlikely, even if circumstances improve, that we're going to be able to do something because of the booking time, et cetera. So I think that Tequesta Fest as a concept, obviously we're not giving it up, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen this year. And so I think using some of those funds, but allowing Greg to retain some for other programs to underwrite the cost of the merit bonus, I think makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, no, I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. I would recommend that we forfeit our pay to make sure that if for some reason the state does allow it and we're able to pull it off, we're able to pull it off.
But we could look at that if it happens.
Coming back later if it happens.
Sure.
To try to appropriate the money.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Don't forget, we also have our discretionary funds.
Yes.
That because of all of these events being canceled, the conferences or whatever, those funds are not going to be touched, or they're going to be touched, very little this year. So that's in the budget right now, but that will be going back. So there is funding from the council in that regard, that there is going to be some funds that will be available that are right now being budgeted as if they will be expended.
I understand. I don't want to see Tequesta Fest go. I understand why it might not happen this year. I just think it's something we remove it. I get concerned that it won't come back.
Right. Okay. Anything else from anyone?
Can I make one more comment just to clarify? When we talk about those ranges, So the ranges, and it's been this way, it's a past practice, and I think it's a good one. With all the unions, we typically move those ranges up with CPI. The same thing with a non-union every year, and the tradition is they move those ranges every year with the CPI. And so while we say we don't have that authority, that's been the policy or practice to do that. And so I just wanted to come back just to make sure that I was clear when giving you guys the wrong information.
Okay. Anything further on item 3?
Do we have any employees that are being paid above their range?
No. And nobody is under their range as well. We did have one employee that was right at it or maybe slightly above or below. We made that adjustment to that employee, and it was probably well worth that employee and probably a little bit behind the times of not getting that employee a better rate anyways, just for the service that they provided for the village. But there is a policy in our non-union that says that they shall stay in that range, so they can't fall below. So it would automatically trigger a raise anyways, I think. And so, but everybody is within a range, whether they're on the high side or low side based on years of service. I mean, there's a whole, whole conversation that would have to take place for every employee, whether they're paid what they should be paid or not.
Don't we do a payout for 1 or 2 employees that have been around for a long time that their pay is within a range, but we end up doing a one-time payout?
So there is a couple of, I know, and I'm just off the top of my head, Merlin may know it better than I do. There is a couple of CWA employees that are that fall outside of the range, and so when they do that, instead of giving them an additional increase with the union increases of 3% or whatever that goes to, we pay them out for that for the employee. I think there's 2 of them, at least within the CWA, that's part of the contract and part of the negotiations we have of how to handle that. Instead of them continuing to move outside of their range, we give them a one-time payout. I'm not familiar, and Merlin can chime in, of anybody outside of CWA that we have that scenario.
Nope, just 2 persons in the CWA outside of their range, but we addressed that in the recent contract, and that will not happen again. Both gentlemen are in the drop, so, and one has 1 year left. So we agreed with the union that we would treat those 2 differently as expressly stated in the contract.
And the approach of paying somebody, in essence, a one-time payment if they're over the range, by the way, that's a frequent policy of the private sector as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anything else? All right, then, Mary Ann, do we have any written questions or comments on items 1 through 3 only?
Let's see, Mayor, I have a couple of comments that came in, and it was just regarding the merit bonus or raise, one statement and one question.
Do you want to read them then?
Sure. Ray Ray's Speed Fab is the poster, and they have stated is a merit bonus or raise, ? A bonus does not raise you hourly. Merit raises do not. And then the next statement is they only get COLA raises, not merit raises.
Okay, that was more of a statement. They're not asking a question?
The only question is it a merit bonus or raise?
I see what you're saying. If the merit bonus, does it get added on to their base salary? I think is what the question is.
Yes.
All right. Jeremy, or Merlin, I believe no.
So this situation is the same with the merit. It's a one-time pay bonus that it's treated like a merit, and that it does not get added onto the yearly salary that is, I guess to say, revolving. So it is a one-time payment that is not added onto the salary.
Okay. Yeah. All right. And the next one.
That was the only question.
All right, then let's do, we have to open the phone lines now. And please, anybody who is on the phone, if you would please mute your own phone because we have to open everyone, unless you wish to speak.
Mayor,
So Brad-
there's only staff is on the line, or is in the Zoom meeting, so there's no external callers.
All right, thank you. I think that we can go on from there. So you didn't have to close it. We're ready to go.
Yep.
All right, let's go to item 4, discussion of charter amendments and process to implement term limits. And also item 5, which is districting. And Attorney Davis, you sent us the information that we required. Do you want to speak to this, please?
Thank you, Mayor. At your last council meeting, these topics were briefly discussed during any other matters. For further discussion tonight, I've given you a brief memo that talks about, kind of breaks it down. First, I identify in the current charter, as you're all aware, you each serve 2-year terms and without being subject to any term limit. So the topic of term limits was brought up, and then along with that, the topic of possible districting was sort of coattailed onto that. 2 very different topics. Both would require a charter amendment, which would require approval by the voters of the village. Probably the easier of the 2 to move forward is the issue of term limits. Term limit, that issue itself really raises 3 questions for the council to work through. First is, do you want term limits at all? And there are philosophical reasons that people believe on both sides of that argument, that why they're good, why they're bad. Obviously, those are questions for the 5 of you to work through. But if you come to a determination that you want to explore term limits and as a amendment to the village charter, then the next question, really, that brings up 2 sub-questions. Number 1, do you want to leave the terms at 2 years, as is common in many places, although some jurisdictions allow for 3-year terms? So that's sort of a sub-question. And then the other sub-question with term limits is, would it be your intent to allow sort of a cooling off period, so that once a council member has served, for example, if you said you could serve for 3 consecutive terms and then your term limited out, there's 2 different ways to proceed. Some jurisdictions would allow you to sit out a full term and then come back. Other jurisdictions say once you've served your maximum of 3 terms, or whatever that number is, you're never eligible again to serve on the village council. And I've given you some text examples of both of those. Palm Beach County adopted term limits about a decade ago, and they're an example of the first situation where if somebody sits out for a period of time, they're eligible to come back in again, and we're actually experiencing that right now with former Commissioner Marcus running again. She was originally term limited out, and now she's running again. Conversely, there's language that I've provided you, I think, from the Jacksonville charter, where it says once you've served whatever the number of terms is, you cannot ever serve again. So those would be things you'd need to discuss as to which model you would want to adopt, both length of term and whether it's whether you allow the cooling off period and come back or not. Obviously the issues that this raises is, you're limiting, you have to look at how many people you have in the community that are eligible to serve in the first place, and whether you feel term limits would limit the pool of eligible candidates or not. I think those are things you guys need to discuss. Those are sort of the three general term limit topics. And as I said, that's really the easier one. The issue of districting is very complicated to do it correctly. It's not typical in smaller communities. That being said, I have a client that's smaller than Tequesta that actually has districts. Now, they went through litigation on that topic when they had to do realigning of the districts and that sort of thing about 20 years ago. And that was I was not involved in that, but I have the files, and it looked like it was a fairly painful process. I've given you a very general overview of the issue and that you have to contend with when you're dealing with districting. How many districts, how many seats do you apply to each district? The districts have to be apportioned fairly in terms of your population. So, we have to do population studies and to make sure that the districts are properly apportioned. And then you have to do that from time to time into the future as times change. There was discussion earlier this evening on the topic of the bridge, how demographics change, population changes, and when those things happen, it's possible that your districts are no longer aligned properly, and you have to go back in and realign them. It just off the top of your head, when you're looking at the issue of districting, it kind of seems intuitive. Well, we have the east side of the bridge and the west side of the bridge. Maybe that's right. Maybe it's not. It would require a factual determination and data that you would have to rely on to support however those districts are drawn. So beyond that, then the question becomes who gets to vote in each district. Typically, again, in smaller jurisdictions, from what I've seen, even if the elected official has to reside in the district that they represent, it's still an at-large election, meaning that everybody in the village gets to vote for every seat, which doesn't take away all of the necessities of making sure it's apportioned and drawn out correctly. So, given that overview, I think and here we are in August, I think it would be extremely difficult. I don't think it really would be possible to get a redistricting plan on the ballot for 2021. I think there's too much advance work. Even after the council was to discuss it and decide you wanted to proceed, I think there's too much advance work to make sure it's done correctly and still have it to the supervisor of elections in time for a 2021 election, which is the last part of my memo. The logistics and the process for doing this. There are a number of questions to ask as well. Under Florida law, when you do a referendum, we have to adopt an ordinance. The ordinance has to contain the ballot, the title for the ballot question, as well as a summary of the description of what the voters are voting on. And as you can see in the memo, the ballot summary is limited to 75 words. So you have 75 words to clearly and accurately describe what the question is, and then 15 words for the title. So the question then becomes, depending on what you want to do you bundle everything into one question, or do you split it into multiple questions? The more questions, the easier it is to write the ballot questions and write the summaries. Obviously, the danger is some things could fail and some could pass, but conversely, if it's bundled into one, then it's going to be all or nothing, and people are either going to pass it all or deny or not pass any of it. So regardless of that, it all would have to be to the supervisor of elections in December, which means that before December, we'd have to have 2 readings of an ordinance preceded by council discussion and direction on exactly what you want. So that is my memo. That's the issues that are before you for further discussion tonight.
I don't know about discussion tonight on this, because I think what we wanted, Keith, was for you to do the work and to get back to us on all of these things. And I think it's a large topic, especially I understand what you're saying about districting. That seems to have more complexity to it. But as far as the term limits, I think that we need as a council to have a workshop to just address this, to understand each of our own philosophies and what are we really saying? What are we trying to do? And so my feeling is that I'm not so sure I'm ready to go into that conversation tonight. I just wanted to understand what we could do. I would prefer, if council agrees, to have a workshop soon that we could go through this and get to know with us, the 5 of us, where are we really on these topics? Because it would be difficult to put this on a ballot. Obviously, it would be, first of all, we'd have to go to a council meeting and vote as well on this, and then go forward. So I'm not quite sure that we're ready. Everybody chime in if you're ready to go for this tonight, or if you would like to go to another council workshop.
I'm ready to talk about it whenever.
I'm sorry?
I'm ready to discuss it whenever.
Okay.
I do agree it's a very large topic. I do think each one of us will have a lot of thoughts on it. Again, I don't disagree that it could be its own workshop agenda item, but if we wanted to discuss it tonight, I am ready.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think due to the complexity of the situation and all the issues that are involved here, I think it actually does merit its own workshop. And I also think hopefully it's a workshop where this gets publicized and we have people from the public actually listening in and perhaps participating. Mary Ann alluded to, or Greg alluded to earlier, that we have no one from the public evidently on tonight's call. So given that, I think we should schedule for a future workshop.
Okay.
I guess I came prepared to talk about it, and Frank, I'm not sure what else we would do to communicate it to the residents at the next workshop. Obviously, I think we can talk on basics today and continue it with another conversation. Obviously, nothing's going to be decided today. It doesn't mean we're going to bring it to council next week, but we can, I think, have the general conversation. I can tell you for the districting side of things, I don't think that it would be appropriate for the village of Cuesta, and I wouldn't support it. I think it brings up too much expenses associated with it, and I don't see the value in it for districting side. For term limits, the reason I brought it up to discussion is because I personally felt like I saw where coming into it from as a new council member this past year and a half, I mean, that there were some things going on, that I think were unintended, but there's value in it bringing in new faces every now and then. And whether that is a term limit for all the seats or a term limit for 2 of them, I don't know what that solution is, but I do think there's a lot of value in, bringing in new people, and I'd be in favor of a cooling off period to where it's, you term out, then you cool off for 2, 3, 4 terms or whatever that is that we decide. I would be absolutely in favor of that, just because so you don't lose that knowledge from a historical perspective. But I think with what I noticed is that there was council members that were their seats were not contested, and it was over and over and over and over. In addition to a manager that was around for 20+ years, that unintended consequences, I think, took place. And that's my concern. In addition to when I went around and visited a lot of the constituents knocking on their doors, a bunch of people were in favor of term limits. Whether or not they totally understood the total concept, I don't know that for sure. That's why I think there's value in talking about it.
All
Well,
right,
since
before we go, let's just get this straight first. Do we want to go for a special workshop to do this where I believe that's the way to go. I hear what you're saying, Lori, thank you, and Kyle, but I guess, Bruce, I haven't heard from you at this point. So I guess what we're trying to figure out is, do we have a workshop that is just about this and that we can publicize, just, highly publicize, and talk about this is what the council is going to be discussing and having more public input?
I think that we should probably make a special workshop for it. We could talk hours and hours and hours and stuff about this and stuff. So but if y'all want to do it tonight, I'm like Lori, I'm game on. We can sit here and talk to midnight if you want to about term limits. So, but it doesn't really make any difference to me. I'm game either way.
Yeah, I think with the public participation, one thing is we're now into the part of the summer vacation schedule. And so I think that's one reason perhaps why we don't have a lot of public representation, because I think a lot of people are off vacationing at the moment and awaiting the start of the school year, however, whatever form that takes.
I think a special workshop then. I think that's what we're going to do. So I guess what we need to do, Jeremy, if you can see if we can't do one very quickly, we don't have to wait until the next one. Should just be about this topic, and we have to make sure that we get a lot of publicity out there in terms of this, so people can just weigh in. Kyle said he talked to a lot of people, and I'm not sure where, you are, Lori, but that may have occurred as well. I speak with people, we all do, but it's going to take a long time to go through this. And it is a philosophy, I believe. And there's a lot of merit on both sides, I believe, that we could all, have a chance to speak our minds.
Yeah, no, I have no problem doing a special meeting. I agree that there is merit on both sides. And I do think that there's a place for a good discussion to try to make it to where it's the benefit to the Village of Tequesta. And that's the key, is that I want it to be the benefit to the Village of Tequesta.
Agreed.
I think we would all agree to that. No question about that. And I would suspect that item 5, districting, we can kind of tag on to that as well. Subsequently, and I brought it up is because my only concern was that we have, as we know, and Lori's a perfect example of all the people that she sees at the bus stop when the bus stop was there. And you tend to work within your own neighborhood. Those are the people you hear from, those are the people that talk to you. And even after you're campaigning, it's unusual that you go back out and do that kind of thing. So that was the only thought process, is that if we would make sure that we had that we were evenly spread out. So the entire village was going to be represented. But I agree with you, Kyle. I think it's far too, it might be just too difficult to do, but you understand the reasoning. So we can add that to our list as well at the next workshop. I don't know that would. All right, anything else on that? And then we can move on to the last item. All right, item 6, discuss the Florida League of Cities 2020 proposed resolutions. I think you all saw it. These are very generic items that you could see that, they're talking about doing a resolution for the town that had the last president or sitting. They have the Florida Government Week, Census Partnership, which I believe we all obviously want to do, and Lori has been working on hard. Mr. Siddig, his retirement. These are not weighty topics, let's just put it that way, or so I thought. And as I've said before, and this would, if anybody has any thoughts on the reauthorization of the National Flood Insurance Program, I think that's a given. I think we all need to, that's a smart thing to do. But does anybody have any questions or thoughts about any of these? I didn't think
yeah.
there was. Go ahead.
I do. I think items 1 through 4 and item 6, which is the flood insurance, are no-brainers. Item 5, which is this resolution to support this legislation in Congress. If that legislation, and I haven't read that bill, but if that legislation is saying that the only thing that's going to be reimbursed are the specific costs incurred as a result of COVID-19, then I'd be okay with that. On the other hand, if it incorporates some of the wish lists of various cities and municipalities, et cetera, who are looking for bailouts, absolutely not. So if you're in New York or in Illinois and you've mismanaged your pension liabilities and you're looking, and this bill is going to somehow be supportive of providing them with bailouts, then I would say no, I would not be in favor of that. Number 7, which is the broadband infrastructure issue. I know we had some discussion about this, Keith. I understand that the state may preempt us here in terms of the construction of the infrastructure. I know it does make a reference in that resolution to local control, but there are people who are bringing up legitimate concerns about the intensity of the frequencies of 5G and the impact it could have on health concerns. And I think that's an issue that we ought to be able to control whether we go forward with 5G in our community. I'm not talking about the infrastructure build out, but whether we actually say yes to that. So again, depending on number 7, depending on what that ultimately means, the way it's worded, I'd want clarity that control over going live with 5G is in our hands, or is in the local community's hands, and we have control over it.
I believe that actually is in that resolution, Frank. I think that's always in anything with the League of Cities, is that essentially that it'll all be back to the municipalities. That is what they're all about, is home rule. So I'm pretty sure I actually saw that in that. I don't have that whole resolution in front of me at the moment, but I hear what you're saying. We could certainly take a look at that.
Do we know if the congressional bill that was cited, whether that again is specifically targeted toward COVID costs only, or does it involve the greater wish list?
I can't answer that. I'd have to go back to that resolution and actually read it word for word again. I believe what we're trying to do is just COVID relief. That is what it's called for cities. Well, but I hear what you're saying, mailing out. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, it referenced a very specific bill that had been put forth in Congress, and I don't have the details of the bill, so.
Yeah, I don't either, but we could certainly look at that, get that out to everyone. I just, like I've said before, not that this is the answer to it, but I have been now to, this will be my 6th conference that we vote. And in 6 conferences, there haven't been 3 meetings where anybody voted against anything. And it's just, they just go forward with this because they've been looking at it. It's always city oriented. It's always back to our own control of how we do anything is what this is about. But that is a good question, especially about the COVID piece of that and that legislation. So we can look at that. I'm happy to vote no. If everybody says vote no, that's fine.
You're the one and only. I agree with Frank's comments on both 5 and 7.
Okay. Well, why don't we find out what we've got going on there before we say no to them? How's that sound?
Sounds good.
Okay. Any other discussions on these topics? All right, Mary Ann, have we any written questions or comments on items 4 through 6?
I do not have any further comments or questions.
All right. Brad, do we have anyone else on the line?
We do not.
All right, then we don't need to do that. So are there any other discussions from council at this time?
I would just like to bring up one thing that I noticed has recently happened. I know that we've been going around and removing political signs from the right of way, and obviously that's something that I support. I wish that if we were to do that in the future, and we know that, or we assume that that sign in front of someone's home maybe we can give a pamphlet or something saying, hey, here's the current ordinance. We have your sign, call us and we'll get back to you. Just something that I think we can do it better with regards to pulling out of an individual's yard who in the past has done that and they think that it is it's okay to do. I just would like to see maybe go on that extra step once we remove those political signs. In addition, I noticed that we've also put up more signage for golf carts that is somewhat misleading concerning in the aspect of, let's say someone has a street legal golf cart. And now you're going to get individuals getting questioned for being in that area, even though it is legal for them to be in that area. I'm not a big fan of having a bunch of signs all over the place. I know on the bridge, we have 6 signs that says you cannot fish on the bridge. I still think that we should have some type of a beautification committee or group that works with trying to get a consistent road sign, consistent notification of whatever it is that's out there. We've got just a variety of different ways throughout the village that I think we're in the process of trying to get it consistent. I just would like to see less signage and more of a consistency there.
I think that's a great comment. I agree with you 100% on that. Putting together a committee, I don't know where that begins. Anybody, Jeremy, do you want to work on that?
Let me add a little more to that group. That committee would be responsible to, identifying what kind of Christmas lights and where we put Christmas lights, and in different, flags on the bridge that are there, along US 1, the flowers in front of our welcome signs, just that aesthetic process that the village has that ability to make those adjustments. I think there would be some individuals within the community that are very qualified to, as a committee, work on that beautification of the village of Weston and work with Jeremy and his team.
Good idea.
Jeremy?
Yeah,
Are you
I
there?
can work on a committee format. I did the comment about, and I understand where Mr. Stone is going. Well, I think we could, we can give some kind of door hanger or something when we take a sign, but you made the comment that we were taking it out of their yards just, for the sake of clarity. We haven't took any signs out of anybody's yards. They can have signs in their yards. We're taking them out of the village right of way. And so just out of clarity, but I do understand even if we're taking them out of the village right away in front of somebody's house, you'd like some kind of notification to those owners where they can pick those signs up and that the village took them.
Yeah, Jeremy, you're correct. I misspoke. That is definitely the village right away and not the resident's home. And I think on that handout, if it could just have that ordinance out there, just so that people understand what's going on.
Just a quick question, Keith, when we talked about the ordinance regarding signs, I thought that the last council put in a policy that said that, and maybe I'm wrong on this, that you could have political signs, but only for a very defined period of time. But was that correct?
Yeah, I think we changed that, Frank.
Oh, okay,
And
so
either
they
way,
eliminated it altogether?
the new ordinance is still in the process. It's going to be in front of LPA this month, and then you're going to see it after that.
Okay.
So your current code is still the current code, and the new ordinance is still in process.
Okay.
Anything else from council? All right, if not, then may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And
night,
thank you
everybody.
to the staff for joining us, all of you taking your time and joining us this evening. Thank you very much.